I think cities are uniquely positioned to affect housing. Since COVID, it's gone bananas, right? You've
Right.
had prices increase exponentially at the same time interest rates have. Usually interest rates go up, prices go down. They've both gone up at the same time. Rents have gone up exponentially. It's difficult and it's across the country. And so I think, what we can do is just make sure we position ourselves in the best way possible to address it, to provide opportunity, but to know what we as a city can do. And, having been here for 15 years, I'm just super encouraged by the city's leadership, by citizens that are really taking the issue seriously and looking to do something about it.
This is the Think Brazos Podcast. We're joined today by David Brower of the City of College Station to talk a little bit about their Housing Action Plan Steering Committee and a survey that they have coming up that we think, associated with Habitat for Humanity, we think is super important for folks to fill out. So we want to talk about that today. David, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hey, Charlie, thanks so much for having me. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So first, before we get into what I just listed here, I wanted to talk a little bit, very briefly, about who you are, how long you've been with the city, and then you work in the affordable housing space. So how did you get into that work?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been with the city for 15 years this
Wow.
past August, in the community services department. And so primarily our department, we manage two federal grants that the city receives, the Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Grant. And so, early on with my time with the city, started managing the city's down payment assistance program.
Oh, yeah.
And so I love doing that, helping folks be able to access purchasing a home. And I know that's, something that y'all with Habitat hold near and dear also. It's amazing to help people become homeowners. And so I've managed that. And then also at the city, we have a minor home repair program.
Okay.
And so I'll help do processing applications for that, where we can help folks that own a home make repairs on their home. So with our grant, we also fund nonprofits. We partnered with Habitat in the past to build homes, or we can use some of our grant funds to purchase land and help make Habitat homes happen in College Station. So I've been in that space and really sort of, graduated in 2008. My first job fell through and my second job fell through. It was right during the Great Recession. And
Oh, yeah.
I had a buddy that worked for the city and was like, hey, you should apply. And, my boss now, Debbie Eller, I'd worked with her in a group project and knew her a little bit. And
That's awesome.
and thought, okay, I'll do that. And I love it. It's fun. It's funny how you stumble into something and then just sort of like, oh, this is neat. This is sort of nonprofit stuff meets government stuff. And
That's awesome.
yeah. So I'll have to say it's been a neat 15 years, really get to, from the city's perspective, get to work with a lot of different local nonprofits and agencies that are trying to help folks, whether it be with social services, with housing, with things like that. And so really enjoy
That's
it.
great. And you graduated from the Bush School, right? In
That's right.
2008. Awesome.
That's right.
That is awesome when I get to meet fellow Bushies, I guess is what I don't know if that's what
right.
we would call themselves, but great program, great school. That's awesome. Well, thank you. Let's get into a little bit more, I guess, the motivations behind the city doing this housing action plan. If I'm getting the wording right, just stop me if I'm not.
That's right.
But
That's correct.
why that is, and maybe a little bit about that existing conditions report.
Sure. So if folks want to go read about the plan and look at that existing conditions report, you can go to cstx.gov/housing plan. All one word. And so, the city's overarching document, kind of the vision that the city has for how the city's going to grow and what the city's going to do, is the city's comprehensive plan. And so back in 2021, there was a comprehensive plan update, and included in the plan are 4 different action items that specifically address housing, affordable housing, making sure there's housing opportunity for folks. And so one of the things you can do is just go to Google and type City of College Station comprehensive plan, and you can look at the plan. You can do a control find, search for housing, and it's there throughout the plan. And so the city's been moving in that direction with a few things, with our middle housing initiatives, with things like that. But then it was recognized that we need more of a concrete effort or a plan to put those action items into motion. And so that's where the housing action plan came from. And
Okay.
so the first step of that plan, the city council appointed 18 citizen committee members. They applied and then were appointed to this committee. And so they are working with staff to develop this plan. But the first thing we did was do an existing conditions report.
Mhm.
So we got a lot of data from the multiple listing service. They were great and shared a bunch of data with us. So we were able to look back at home sales for different types of homes. They went back 10 plus years, looking at what folks are doing as far as rent and what our housing stock looks like and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And, a couple big things came out of that. If you go look at the plan, there's a summary and some of the big items are, and this is statewide and national, homes are just getting a lot more expensive.
Right.
The median sales price for a non-new home in College Station is over $380,000.
Wow.
And then when you look at renters, close to 50% of renters are cost burdened, which means they spend more than 30% of their monthly income on housing costs. And then looking at the type of housing we have. So most housing in College Station is either single family or multifamily, larger apartment complexes. So single family homes, we don't have a lot in between. And
Yeah.
so, the city, if folks are interested, and I know y'all have discussed this on your podcast before, middle housing initiatives that have
Yeah.
happened with the city of College Station, but that's an effort to sort of address some of that, to create more housing types, more options,
Mhm.
more types, not only more housing, more types of housing that'll be available to people to either rent or purchase. And then the other one of the main observations from the existing conditions report is we're just projected to have a shortfall. You look at
Right.
population growth and then the projection of what is going to be built in College Station, there's a shortfall. And so
Mhm.
does not help with affordability, just supply and demand. If there's a lot of people wanting something and not a lot of it to go around, prices are going to increase. So
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah.
I was reading over that report this morning actually and came across something, just a random fact you had in there was that you talked about that middle housing piece, those, smaller, not dozens and dozens of homes, but, 2, 3, 4 homes in a unit. And I noticed you had this interesting fact that I think it was threeplexes or fourplexes. Their average age was surprisingly old, like 1981, I think is what I saw. And so, yeah, that's just to illustrate what you're just saying, that a lot of the middle housing is not. I mean, 1981 was a long time ago, and so it's not getting built the way maybe y'all would like to see it potentially. Is that correct?
Right. And some of that is just when you look at zoning in the city, a lot of our zoning just hasn't allowed for that.
Oh,
And so, the largest city initiated rezoning that's ever occurred just happened recently, where a lot of different areas in the city were rezoned to middle housing to where those types of units can be built. And so
okay.
that's good. And that's sort of what this plan, getting into what this plan is meant to accomplish. After looking at existing conditions, really, what tools does the city have at its disposal to be able to affect, two things. One is housing supply. So how can we just make more housing and more housing types?
Right.
And middle housing is a good example of that, to where that's a way to do that. You can look at a current zoning and say, you know what, it makes sense. Zoning's there for a reason, but maybe it makes sense to have a little more density in this area or that area, and these different types allowed. And then the other thing that's available are tools that create affordable housing specifically, not just more
Right.
units, but units that are for people at or below a certain income, and at different prices than the market may dictate. So
Okay.
so what are those tools?
Yeah.
Another set of tools are how do you fund all that stuff? And so that's another thing we're looking at as
Right.
well.
So I don't know if you can even speak to this because I know, as far as I understand it, ultimately the decision for how y'all proceed lies with the council. But if I can ask it anyways, and feel free to say I can't get into that, are there a couple of tools on that list that y'all think are feasible? Or because there are a lot of them. Didn't you say there were like 30 something different tools on your
There's lots, and there's more than that. And part of this public outreach, and I know we're going to talk about surveys in a second, or we want to know what ideas
yeah,
everyone else has, right? There's
exactly.
innovative ideas. And so what we've looked at lots of different plans that other cities have done. Like
Yeah.
it's not a local problem, it's a national problem. So cities across the country have these they call them housing action plans, housing initiatives, how, just what they can do. But there's lots of different things. And so, right, some of those things, if we look at our existing programs. So right now we have a down payment assistance program.
Right.
We have adjusted it as the market's changed. Changes happens a little more gradually pre-COVID, pre-2020. And so we've changed our program to be up to $50,000 that we have available for folks to purchase a home.
Wow.
Where our income limits are now, even with that and where prices are and interest rates, that doesn't do it. Like we're not doing any down payment assistance deals right now. And so one thing there are tools that would work. We could provide more money, and there are cities that are doing this. But instead of the money going out and just coming back when the house is sold, you can do something like deed restrict the house to where then it helps that family buy that house. But then going forward, it's sold to another income eligible family and then another one. And so you deed restrict it to where the resale is restricted. You basically take it off the market and make it a house that then is an affordable option for families going forward. And so that's something as we look at like, well, gosh, we need to do something. Homeownership is a goal that the city has. We want people to be able to buy into the community, own a home here. Something like that is a tool you can do that justifies a larger public investment and that helps create a housing stock that is affordable going forward. So there's things like that. And one just off the cuff is, middle housing. So the city's bought into that. Where it makes sense. And, there's a large citizen committee effort to get into middle housing. And so I think another tool is just greater density. Where does it make sense to have more of the density and to where we can produce more units? So while we're creating affordable units, because if all we did was create programs to create more affordable units, we'd be putting more people out into the market to buy a supply that wasn't increasing if we didn't also create more units. Staff's recommendation is we need a balanced approach. And if you read, it's like you have to do both. You have to create more units and you also have to have programs, have initiatives that also help people access the market through making units affordable.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. And, kind of getting back to the idea of getting citizens input for some of these tools. Can we talk a little more detail about these surveys that are out there? And before we do, just want to make clear, I went out there and took the survey. It's pretty detailed, but David's going to get into why it's so important that you fill out the whole thing. It's a great survey.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. And, so we've got 3 surveys. And so that same web address, if you go to cstx.gov/housing plan at the top, you can see the existing conditions report, but just scroll a little bit down and there's a button for each of these 3 surveys. And so one's just a general survey. It's for anybody and it's wanting to know information about you, where you live, where you work, what type of home you live in, where do you live, but then also wants to know how housing affects you. And then also, what are some ideas you have for how housing can be addressed and what maybe you'd be willing to do as a citizen in order to achieve those?
Okay.
And so asking those sorts of questions, there's some good open-ended. So if you go all the way to the end, we want to know, what ideas do you have? What are you seeing in the market? What are ways you think this can be addressed? And so that's the general survey. We've got one specifically for college students. So wanting to know, as a college student, how does housing affect you? What are issues you face with housing? And what do you think would be some good things that could be done to help you with housing?
That's great.
And then the last one's for employers. So wanting to know, as an employer, someone that employs other people, how does housing affect you as an employer? Your ability to hire, to retain staff, and then you as an employer, have you ever thought of different employer initiatives that you could do to help employees with housing? Have you heard of some of these? Do you do any of them? And then again, at the end, what ideas do you have? What could be done to help with the housing situation specifically for you as an employer? What do you think would be good and beneficial?
Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and post in our show notes and all of that links to these surveys as well. So again, to all of our listeners, I think it is well worth it because, and I'll get into it with my last question, as it does, in my opinion, it really does seem like College Station, for a variety of reasons, is like a lot of the country, and you cannot easily be a low income family individual and find housing that is affordable in College Station. It's a difficult problem, and I guess I'm not trying to torpedo what we're doing here, but I kind of wanted to know, do you think long run is College Station going to be able to fix it, to be able to have units that are affordable in some way for low income families to live there?
I think so. And I think, that the goal, so if you look at the problem, a lot of it's just framing the issue, right?
Okay.
So housing, it's an economic development issue. And one of the reasons we have this employer survey is if you have workers that can't live close to where they're employed, that's an issue.
Mhm.
If you make job offers to folks and they maybe don't take those job offers because afterwards they come here and then go look to either purchase a home or find a place to rent and go, oh gosh, never mind, I'm just going to stay where I am. That's a little too expensive. And so it's an economic development issue. In that sense, for employers, it's an HR issue. Some of the things I've read are, looking at housing as infrastructure. So the city doesn't build housing like it builds public infrastructure, but the
Right.
city sets some of the rules by how it's built, through our zoning, through different initiatives we have. And so I think what we want to do as a city is position ourselves, make sure that what we have, make sure we know what's available, right? There's a toolbox and it's full of tools. What are those? So knowing what those are and what's at our disposal, and then doing the best we can with those tools to make sure that we create opportunities for folks to be able to access housing. And I think one of the good things is, the citizens and the city council have made that a priority through the comprehensive plan.
Great.
Which is good. That's a good first step, realizing that gosh, we need to do something about this. And now, more encouraging is with this housing action plan that the council has set us to go and produce, and with this committee. So yeah, I think cities are uniquely positioned to affect housing. Since COVID, it's gone bananas, right? You've had prices increase exponentially at the same time interest rates have. Usually interest rates go up, prices go down. They've both gone up at the same time. Rents have gone up exponentially. It's difficult, and it's across the country. And so I think, what we can do is just make sure we position ourselves in the best way possible to address it, to provide opportunity, but to know what we as a city can do. And, having been here for 15 years, I'm just super encouraged by the city's leadership, by citizens that are really taking the issue seriously and looking to do something about it. So I hope that answers the question. I don't think we can, the city can't in and of itself make housing affordable. We don't build housing, most of it, but, we have zoning here, and cities do set what can be built, how it can be built. And cities have lots of tools also, and lots of financing mechanisms, lots of things to then not only address supply and type, but also to create specific opportunities.
Right.
One of our committee members asked a question this morning about our down payment assistance program and what do other cities do? Specifically Dallas, they were interested in. And they have a program like ours that's for people at or below 80% of the area median income, but they also have a program for folks at or below 120% of the area median income. And it's specifically addressed to meet the needs or to help teachers, educators, people in healthcare, and people in first responders, law enforcement, and fire.
That's cool.
And so it's wow, that's interesting. Cities can do that. And they also have another program, 2 down payment assistance programs that aren't federally funded, that are funded through other funds. The other one's an anti-displacement one. So if you've lived in the city of Dallas for 10 or more years, you have access to this other down payment assistance program to help folks not have to leave that have been residents as prices increase. And that's just one example, but there's lots of different, so that's what we're in the stage of doing right now. What tools are available? And so we're in this feedback stage because what staff and what the committee's doing now is gathering this information. We know there's a problem. The city's committed to doing something about it. But then the issue is, okay, what goals should we have? Who should we look? What type? There's lots of different types of ways you can help folks with housing, with assistance. And so moving forward, hopefully some of this feedback. Also just want to throw in, there's 2 opportunities for public meetings coming up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
So one of them is going to be on the 21st, Thursday, March 21st, the MTF building. It's a meeting and facility training center over on Graham Road at the utility building. A lot of folks know where you can go early vote. It's going to be there in the assembly room. So there's that one. It's at 6 p.m. there. And then the other one's going to be here at City Hall on March 26th. So a Tuesday night, 6 o'clock. And so they're at the same place, cstx.gov/housing plan. There's information on those public meetings, when they are, where they're going to be, and the address. And so we'd love folks to take the survey and then come out. We'll have staff and committee members there so that if folks want to talk about the plan or what's up with housing, what we're trying to accomplish, we'd be glad to talk to anybody there and also get more feedback.
That's great. Well, looks like we are out of time for today, but David, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and we'll make sure we get this out plenty of time for people, hopefully, to come to these meetings as well as to take those surveys. So really appreciate you coming on the Think Brazos podcast, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Charlie, thanks. Appreciate it.